The rifle was pointed at her head. Thornhill's hand shook with rage. 20 of his men surrounded us. We were out of bullets, out of time. This was how it ended. But then Sarah spoke, her voice calm as creek water, and what she said next changed everything. You see, 10 years ago I made a choice that seemed simple at the time. I pulled a dying Apache girl from the snow. Never thought I'd see her again. I was wrong. She said she'd come back to marry me. 10 years ago. She was 15 half dead from a bullet wound, fever burning through her like wildfire. She said she'd come back to marry me. 10 years ago. She was 15 half dead from a bullet wound, fever burning through her like wildfire. I'd found her in the snow 3 days' ride from anywhere that mattered. Her family massacred, her people scattered. Just a girl with eyes too old for her face and a will that wouldn't break. I fed her, kept her warm, taught her English while the winter howled outside my cabin. And when the Apache scouts finally tracked her down that spring, she stood in my doorway wrapped in the blanket I'd given her and said it, clear as Sunday bells, "When I am woman I come back. I marry you." I smiled, thought it was the sweetest, saddest thing I'd ever heard. A child's gratitude dressed up as a promise. I never expected to see her again. I was wrong. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Sacramento mountains, painting the valley floor in shades of amber and rust. Heat still radiated from the packed earth of my small ranch, though the worst of the day had passed. I sat on the porch, leather reins spread across my lap, working oil into the cracked surface with practiced hands. The smell of saddle soap and aged leather mingled with the dry desert wind that swept down from the peaks. 52 years had weathered my face like the mountains themselves. Deep lines carved by sun and wind, a beard more silver than brown eyes that had seen too much and remembered more than they should. My hands bore the scars of a hard life. Rope burns, knife cuts, the puckered mark where a Comanche arrow had gone clean through my palm back in '67. The ranch wasn't much, 40 acres of scrub and rock with a creek that ran year-round if you were lucky, a cabin built from pine and adobe, a corral that held 6 good horses, a barn that leaned slightly west but kept the weather out. It was mine, paid for with Army wages and 15 years of silence. I'd been a scout once. Benjamin Hawthorne, they called me. Rode with Crook during the Apache campaigns. Learned to read sign better than most Indians, track a man across bare rock, survive on cactus water and snake meat when necessary. I was good at it. Too good, maybe. Good enough that they kept sending me out even when my stomach turned at what we found, what we did. Sand Creek changed me. Wasn't there for the massacre itself, thank God, but I saw the aftermath. Women and children mostly. Old men. The kind of thing that makes you question whether civilization is worth the price we're paying for it. I mustered out 6 months later. Told them I was done. Bought this land as far from everything as I could manage and tried to forget. But some things don't forget. They just wait. I'd been married once. Elizabeth. Pretty girl from Philadelphia who thought the frontier would be romantic. Died giving birth to our son in the cabin behind me. The boy Thomas lasted 2 years before fever took him. After that I stopped pretending I deserved happiness. Just worked, the land broke horses, kept to myself. The townspeople in Alamogordo knew me as the hermit on the hill. The man who didn't talk much and didn't want company. 17 years I'd lived that way. 17 years of silence broken only by the wind and the horses and the occasional visit from Doc Wilson when he needed help with a difficult animal. It was enough. Or so I told myself. The sound of hooves on hard ground made me look up. At first I thought it was heat shimmer, the way the air dances when the desert floor gives up its warmth. But the shape resolved as it came closer, walking slow and steady up the trail that led to my porch. A horse, yes, but also a rider. Small frame, dark hair and long braids that caught the golden light. My hands stopped moving. The leather reins fell slack in my lap. I knew those braids, knew that way of sitting a horse like she'd been born in the saddle, knew the set of those shoulders even though a decade had passed and she'd grown from girl to woman. She stopped at the edge of my property, maybe 20 paces from the porch. Didn't dismount. just sat there on a paint mare, looking at me with eyes that hadn't changed at all. Dark as creek stones, deep enough to drown in. Sarah. The name came back to me like a prayer I'd forgotten I knew. Sarah Moon that rises. Dakea in her mother's tongue. The girl I'd found bleeding in the snow 10 winters past. The child who'd trusted me when she had no reason to trust any white man. The one who'd made a promise I'd never expected her to keep. I stood slowly setting the reins aside. My knees protested. Everything protested these days. But I got to my feet and stepped down from the porch boot heels crunching on gravel. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just watched me with that same intense focus I remembered, like she was reading something written in a language only she understood. The sun behind her made a halo of dust and light. She wore buckskin traditional Apache dress, but with concessions to the white world. A cotton shirt beneath the leather vest. Boots instead of moccasins. Her hair was clean and braided with colored thread. Not the desperate, starving creature I'd pulled from the snow. A woman now, full-grown and frightening in her beauty. I stopped 10 paces away. Didn't know what to say. Didn't know if I should say anything. She swung down from the horse with fluid grace, held the reins loosely in one hand, took 2 steps toward me and stopped. "I come back," she said. Her voice was lower than I remembered, still carried that careful precision of someone speaking a learned language. Like I said, the words hit me harder than any bullet ever had. My throat went tight. I managed a nod. "You didn't have to," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. I wanted to. 3 words, simple as that. But they carried the weight of 10 years, 4 winters of searching, hundreds of miles traveled alone. I could see it in the way she held herself, the confidence that came from surviving things that should have killed her. A gust of wind swept across the valley, carrying the smell of sage and creosote. Her horse shifted, shook its mane. Sarah didn't move, just kept those dark eyes fixed on mine. Memory flooded back unbidden. The weight of her in my arms as I'd carried her into the cabin, blood soaking through my coat. The way her breath had rattled in her chest, wet and desperate. The fever that had burned for 3 days straight while I'd forced water down her throat and prayed to a God I wasn't sure was listening. I'd found her near Dead Man's Pass, 3 days north of here. Winter had come early that year, snow already thick on the ground. I'd been tracking a mountain lion that had killed one of my horses when I'd seen the tracks. Unshod ponies, 7 or 8 of them. And then the blood trail. Too much blood. The raiders had hit at dawn, she'd told me later, when her English was good enough to form the words. White men with rifles. Hired guns looking for Apache scalps because the territorial government was still paying bounty. Her father had died, first shot off his horse, trying to draw them away from the women. Her mother and younger sister had fallen next. Sarah had run. A bullet had found her anyway, high on the left side, just below the ribs. She'd crawled for 2 days before I found her. Maybe would have made it another few hours before the cold or the blood loss finished what the bullet had started. I'd made a choice that day. Knew it was dangerous keeping an Apache in my cabin with the territory still bleeding from decades of war. But I'd seen too much death already. Caused too much of it myself. I couldn't walk away. 3 weeks she'd stayed with me. Long enough for the wound to close. Long enough for her to learn basic English and for me to pick up a little Apache. Long enough for her to stop flinching every time I entered the room. We'd developed a routine. I'd leave food on the table and step outside. She'd eat and leave the plate by the door. Slowly, carefully, trust had formed. The scouts had found her on the first warm day of spring. I'd known they were coming, seen the signs 2 days before they arrived. Could have hidden her. Part of me wanted to. But she had a right to her people, to her life. I couldn't keep her just because I'd gotten used to having someone else in the cabin. When they'd arrived, 5 warriors led by an older man with gray in his braids, I'd brought Sarah outside. She'd stood there wrapped in the blanket I'd given her, looking small and lost between 2 worlds. The old warrior had spoken to her in rapid Apache. She'd responded just as quickly. Then she'd turned to me. "When I am woman, I come back. I marry you." The warriors had looked shocked. The old man, who I'd later learn was her Uncle Grey Wolf, had protested loudly. But Sarah had just looked at me with those creekstone eyes and smiled. A small, sad smile that said she knew it was impossible but wanted to say it anyway. I'd smiled back, touched her shoulder briefly, told her to go with her people, be safe, have a good life. I never thought I'd see her again. But here she stood, a decade later, still wearing that same expression, still carrying that same impossible promise. "Come inside," I finally said, managing to push the words past the tightness in my chest. "Let's talk. If you've come all this way, the least I can offer you is a meal." Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. She nodded once, wrapped the reins around the porch rail, and followed me up the steps. The cabin felt smaller with her in it. I'd grown accustomed to having space, to the silence and solitude. Now every sound seemed amplified. The scrape of the chair as she pulled it out from the table, the soft rustle of buckskin as she sat, the way the floorboards creaked under her weight. I busied myself with the stove, building up the fire, setting a pot to boil. Had some beans left over from yesterday. Cornbread that was only a day old. Not much, but better than trail rations. My hands moved through familiar motions while my mind raced. She was here, actually here. The girl I'd saved had become a woman and tracked me down across however many miles, through however much danger, to keep a promise I'd never asked her to make. Why? The question burned, but I couldn't ask it. Not yet. First, we needed to find our footing. Remember how to be in the same space without the immediacy of survival driving us. I glanced back at her as I stirred the beans. She sat with her hands folded on the table, looking around the cabin with careful attention. Her gaze lingered on things I'd forgotten were there. The blanket I'd given her, now folded and placed on a shelf above the fireplace. The crude crutch I'd carved when her wound had made it hard to walk. A small wooden horse I'd whittled during one of those long winter nights while she'd slept. "You keep everything," she said softly. I turned back to the stove, felt heat that had nothing to do with the fire climb up my neck. Didn't see a reason to throw away good things. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with 10 years of absence and all the things we didn't know about each other anymore. The beans heated through. I ladled them into 2 bowls, added chunks of cornbread, poured coffee that was strong enough to strip paint, set it all on the table, and sat across from her. She ate like someone who'd learned not to waste food. Small bites, thorough chewing, nothing left in the bowl. I found myself watching her more than eating my own meal, trying to reconcile the starving, frightened girl with this self-possessed woman. When she finished, she wrapped both hands around the coffee mug, looked down into the dark liquid like it held answers. "How long did it take you to find me?" I asked finally, because the question had been building since she'd arrived and I needed to know. 4 winters, 4 years. The words sat heavy in the air between us. 4 years of searching for a man she'd known for 3 weeks a decade ago. Why? The question came out rougher than I intended. "I'm nobody special, Sarah. Just an old man trying to live quiet." She looked up then, met my eyes directly. "You saved my life." I shook my head. "That was 10 years ago. You don't owe me anything for that. Not about owing." Her words came slow, careful. "About choosing." I didn't understand. Couldn't wrap my head around the idea that anyone would spend 4 years tracking someone down for anything other than vengeance or desperation. She must have seen the confusion on my face, because she set down the mug and pulled up the left sleeve of her shirt. The scar was there exactly where I remembered it, puckered and pale against her darker skin. The place where the bullet had gone in, and I'd dug it out with a knife sterilized in whiskey while she'd bitten down on a piece of leather and tried not to scream. "You saved me here," she said, touching the scar. Then she moved her hand to her chest directly over her heart. "And here." I looked away. Couldn't hold that gaze any longer. My coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. 4 years, I said again. "That's a long time to look for someone. Your people must have needed you." Her face went still. Something flickered behind her eyes. Pain maybe, or grief. Both. "My people," she said slowly, "are gone." The words dropped like stones into still water. I waited, didn't push, let her find whatever words came next. Soldiers come 2 winters ago. Say we must go to reservation. Say we must leave our land, our homes. Some warriors fight. Many die. Rest they take north. Oklahoma Territory. Put behind fence like animals. I'd heard about the relocations. Everyone had. It was official policy now sanctioned by Washington. Round up the Apache, ship them east, let them die quietly out of sight. Civilization marching forward over the bones of the people who'd been here first. And you, I run. Her jaw set. Before they take me, before they put me in cage, I run and I look for you. Because I'd saved her life. Because she'd made a promise. Because in all the world, across all those miles and all that danger, I was the one thing she'd remembered as good. The weight of it pressed down on my chest. I stood abruptly, carried my bowl to the wash basin, needed to move, to do something other than sit under the intensity of her trust. You can't stay here, I said to the wall, not turning around because I couldn't face her. It's too dangerous. They'll be looking for runaways. If they find you here, they'll arrest you, send you back, or worse. I know. Then why come? Because you the only place I have. I turned around then. Couldn't help it. She was still sitting at the table, but her hands were clenched into fists now, her jaw tight, eyes bright with something that might have been tears if she'd let them fall. 10 years I think about you, she said, every day. When I learned to speak better English, I think he'd teach me this. When I learned to track, to hunt, to fight, I think I must be strong like him. When bad things happen and I want to give up, I remember you give me blanket, you give me food, you give me life when you could let me die. You not know me, you not owe me anything, but you save me anyway. She stood then, crossed the small space between us, stopped close enough that I could see the rise and fall of her breathing, close enough to smell sage and wood smoke in her hair. I make promise when I am girl, she said, not because I owe you, because I see who you are. I see man who fight his own people to save one Apache girl. I see man with honor. And when I grow up, I think this is man I choose. This is man I want. My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets, tried to find words that wouldn't come. I'm old. I finally managed. 52. You're young. Got your whole life ahead of you. You could find someone your own age, someone better. Don't want better. Want you. The simplicity of it broke something in my chest. I'd spent 17 years believing I didn't deserve a second chance, that God had taken my family as punishment for the blood on my hands from those years in uniform. I'd made peace with dying alone, convinced myself it was what I deserved. But this woman, this beautiful, stubborn, impossible woman, she was offering me something I'd stopped believing in. Not just companionship, not just comfort. Redemption. I can't give you what you deserve, I said, voice barely above a whisper. You already did. She reached out, touched my arm gently. You give me life. Now I give mine to you. Before I could respond, before I could figure out what to say to that, we both heard it. The sound of horses. Multiple riders coming fast up the trail. Sarah's hand dropped to her side. Her whole body went tense, ready to run or fight. I moved to the window, peered out through the gap in the curtains. 5 men on horseback. Apache by their dress and the way they sat their mounts. The one in front was older gray, streaking his black hair face, carved by time and weather, into something hard and proud. I recognized him even after 10 years. Gray Wolf. Sarah breathed the name like a curse. Stay here, I said. Let me talk to them. No. She moved to stand beside me. This is my choice. I speak. We stood there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder at the window, watching the riders approach. Then she straightened, lifted her chin, and walked to the door. I followed her out onto the porch. The 5 Apache reined in their horses at the edge of the property. Gray Wolf sat his mount like he was carved from the same stone as the mountains behind him. His eyes found Sarah, immediately tracked over her like he was checking for injuries. Then they shifted to me. Cold, assessing, remembering. Dakea. His voice carried clearly across the dusty yard. You must come home. Sarah answered in Apache words flowing fast and sharp. Gray Wolf responded in kind, his tone hardening. The other warriors shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to the rifles slung across their backs. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Argument, demand, refusal. Sarah's voice rose forceful, brooking no compromise. Grey Wolf's face darkened. He said something that made the other warriors exchange glances. Then Sarah switched to English. So I would understand. So there would be no confusion about where she stood. I am not going back, Uncle. I make my choice. Grey Wolf's gaze shifted to me again. Lingered. I stood my ground, kept my hands visible, and away from the rifle I'd left leaning by the door. You, he said. His English was better than I expected. You keep my brother's daughter from her people. I gave her a choice, I said, same as I did 10 years ago. She's free to go or free to stay. That's her decision, not mine. She is blood of the Apache. She belongs with us. She belongs to herself. The words hung in the air between us. Grey Wolf's jaw tightened. For a long moment I thought he might order his warriors to attack, consequences be damned. But then Sarah stepped forward, putting herself between us. She spoke in Apache again. Long sentences, measured and clear. I watched Grey Wolf's face as she talked. Saw anger give way to something else. Resignation maybe. Or respect. When she finished, silence stretched. One of the younger warriors said something quietly. Grey Wolf shook his head once sharp. You taught her to be stubborn, the old man said to me. His English carried the weight of accusation. No, sir. She came that way. I just fed her while she healed. Grey Wolf looked at Sarah again. Something passed between them. A conversation without words, built on shared blood and shared loss. If you stay with this man, he said to her, switching to English, you cannot come back. The tribe will not welcome you. You understand this? I understand. If he hurts you, if he breaks your heart, I will know, and I will return with more than words. Sarah nodded. I know. Grey Wolf turned his attention to me one final time. His eyes were hard as flint. You think you know her. You think saving her life 10 years ago makes you worthy of her now. But you are wrong. She is stronger than you, braver than you. She has survived things that would break most men. Do not mistake her kindness for weakness. I don't, I said, and I won't. See that you don't. He gathered his reins. Because if you do, white man, I will make you wish the Comanche had finished you when they had the chance. With that, he wheeled his horse around. The other warriors followed. Within moments they were riding back down the trail, dust rising in their wake. Sarah stood motionless until they disappeared from sight. Then her shoulders sagged slightly. Just a fraction, but enough that I saw it. Enough that I understood the cost of what she'd just done, standing up to her family, choosing me over her blood. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. Yes, I did. He's your uncle, your family. You are my family now. She turned to face me, eyes dry but fierce. I choose you, like I said I would, like I always will. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The temperature was dropping fast the way it did in the desert. Soon it would be cold enough to need a fire. Come inside, I said again. We'll figure this out. She nodded, took one last look at the empty trail where her uncle had disappeared, then followed me back into the cabin. That night we sat by the fire and talked, really talked for the first time since she'd arrived. She told me about the 10 years since I'd last seen her, how the Apache scouts had taken her back to her people, how she'd been welcomed but also changed by her time with me, how learning English had made her useful as a translator when the soldiers came, how she'd watched her world shrink and fracture under the pressure of westward expansion. She'd been at Sibique when the soldiers had come to arrest the medicine man, had seen the fight that followed the deaths on both sides, had helped smuggle children to safety while warriors bought them time with their lives. She'd learned to move silently through hostile territory, to survive on nothing, to become invisible when necessary. And through it all, she'd held on to the memory of a white man who'd shown her kindness when he had no reason to, who'd risked his own safety to save a life that most people thought worthless. When I am woman, I come back, she said again, staring into the flames. I mean those words, not just words, promise. I told her about my 17 years of solitude, about Elizabeth and Thomas buried on the hill behind the cabin, about the ghosts that kept me company on long nights when sleep wouldn't come, about the work I did breaking horses because it was something I understood, something that didn't require me to think about what I'd lost. We talked until the fire burned low and exhaustion made our words slur. Then I gave her the bed and took the floor a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. It felt right somehow, familiar, like stepping back into a story I'd thought was finished but was only just beginning its second chapter. Outside, coyotes sang to the stars. The wind whispered through the pines, and for the first time in 17 years, I fell asleep thinking that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face tomorrow alone. The weeks that followed Sarah's arrival settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. She rose before dawn, had coffee ready by the time I stumbled out of bed with protesting knees and a back that reminded me of every hard mile I'd ever ridden. She worked without being asked, mending fence, grooming horses, hunting rabbits with a bow she'd fashioned from juniper wood. We spoke little during the day, but the silence between us felt comfortable rather than empty, like two people who'd learned that words weren't always necessary. She taught me Apache in the evenings, simple phrases at first, greetings, names for common things. The language felt strange in my mouth, all hard consonants and sounds that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than English ever reached. I butchered the pronunciation regularly. She'd correct me with patience, repeating the words slowly while I tried to wrap my tongue around syllables that didn't want to cooperate. One night, as we sat by the fire after supper, she asked about the scar on my back. I'd been reaching for more wood when my shirt had pulled tight, revealing the puckered line that ran from shoulder blade to spine. What happened? Her fingers gestured toward the mark. I settled back into my chair, felt the old wound pull even though it had been healed for decades. Comanche Lance, back in '69, was tracking a raiding party that had hit a settlement near Fort Concho. Got careless, let them circle behind me. You live. Barely. My partner, a Tonkawa scout named Standing Bear, he pulled me out. Carried me 15 miles to the fort on his back. Saved my life, no question. Where is he now? I stared into the flames. Dead. Caught cholera 2 years later. Gone in 3 days. Sarah nodded slowly. Many good people gone. Only the stubborn ones stay. That got a smile out of me. Guess that makes us both stubborn. Good, she said. Stubborn people survive. The peaceful routine couldn't last. Part of me had known it from the moment Sarah arrived, but I'd let myself pretend otherwise. Let myself believe that maybe we could exist in our small bubble, hidden from the world's attention. The first warning came on a Tuesday morning. I'd ridden into Alamogordo for supplies, left Sarah at the ranch with strict instructions to stay out of sight if anyone came by. The town sat in a valley 30 miles east, a collection of adobe buildings and false-fronted stores that served the ranchers and miners who worked the territory. Maria Gonzalez ran the general store, a sturdy building that smelled of tobacco leather and the chili peppers that hung in long ristras from the ceiling beams. She was a handsome woman in her early 40s, widow of a vaquero who'd been killed breaking a Mustang 5 years back. We'd developed a friendship built on mutual respect and the understanding that neither of us wanted more than that. She looked up when I walked in, and something in her expression made me stop. Her dark eyes carried a warning. "Ben," she said quietly, glancing toward the back of the store where 2 men in dusty trail clothes were examining saddles. "We need to talk." I nodded. Started gathering the supplies I needed. Flour, salt, coffee, ammunition. Maria kept her voice low as she tallied the items. "Colonel Thornhill was in here yesterday, asking questions about you." My hand stilled on a sack of beans. Marcus Thornhill, my former commanding officer from the Apache campaigns. A man who'd made his career on the bodies of Indians and wasn't particular about whether they were hostile or peaceful. He'd transitioned from military to civilian life as an Indian agent, a position that gave him power over reservation assignments and supplies. Also gave him ample opportunity for graft. What kind of questions? Whether you'd been around, whether you'd had any visitors. She lowered her voice even further. "Ben, he knows. About the Apache woman. How someone saw you both riding into town 2 weeks ago. Word travels. You know how it is. I did know. Small towns were their own kind of prison. Everyone watching everyone else. Privacy was a luxury nobody could afford. What did you tell him? That I hadn't seen you in months? That I minded my own business and expected others to do the same? She met my eyes directly. He didn't believe me. I paid for the supplies, loaded them into the wagon I'd borrowed from Doc Wilson. Tried to keep my movements calm and unhurried, even though tension was building in my shoulders. Maria followed me outside. The street was quiet heat already shimmering off the packed earth even though it wasn't yet noon. "Ben," she said. Her voice carried concern. "Be careful. Thornhill isn't just making conversation. He's planning something." "What makes you say that?" "Because I know men like him. My husband used to work for him before we realized what kind of man he was." She crossed her arms. "Thornhill doesn't ask questions unless he already knows the answers. He's building a case, against me, against anyone who gets in his way." She glanced back at the store. "Just watch yourself. And tell your friend she should be careful, too." I drove the wagon back to the ranch with my mind working through possibilities, none of them good. Thornhill had been a ruthless officer, and he'd become an even more ruthless administrator. If he'd set his sights on Sarah on me, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. The question was, what exactly did he want? Sarah was waiting on the porch when I arrived, rifle across her lap. She stood as I pulled up, helped me unload without being asked. "Trouble," she said. I told her about Thornhill, about Maria's warning. Her face went still as she listened the way it did when she was thinking hard. "This man," she said when I finished, "you know him, used to serve under him. He's dangerous, Sarah, uses the law like a weapon, and he's got no love for Apache. Then we must be ready." I looked at her, really looked. Saw the set of her jaw, the way her hand rested easy on the rifle. This wasn't the frightened girl I'd pulled from the snow. This was a warrior who'd learned to survive in a world that wanted her dead. "You fought before," I said. Not a question. Many times. Her eyes met mine. "After you save me, my people teach me. Teach me to track, to hunt, to fight. They say if white men come again, you must not be helpless." So I learn. "Good," I said, "because things are going to get harder before they get better." The next week proved me right. 3 times I found evidence of someone watching the ranch. Boot prints that weren't mine near the creek. A broken branch at the edge of the tree line where someone had stood for a while. Fresh horse droppings on a ridge that gave a clear view of the cabin. Sarah spotted them too. She'd taken to doing a perimeter check each morning, moving silent through the scrub like she was part of the landscape. She'd come back, point out what she'd found, and we'd adjust our routines accordingly. We set up a warning system, tin cans strung on thin wire at various approaches to the property, a mirror positioned to reflect sunlight into the cabin if anyone came from the north. We moved the horses closer to the house at night where we could hear if someone tried to steal them. It felt like being back in the war, constant vigilance, always ready for the attack you knew was coming but couldn't predict when or from where. 10 days after my trip to town, Doc Wilson came calling. He arrived in late afternoon, his medical bag slung over his shoulder and concern written across his weathered face. Doc was one of the few people I trusted absolutely. He'd been practicing medicine in the territory for 40 years, had seen everything from cholera epidemics to arrow wounds, and treated everyone the same regardless of color or creed. I met him at the edge of the property. Sarah had already spotted him from the cabin, knew he was friendly. "Ben," Doc said, "we need to talk. And I need to meet your guest." I brought him inside. Sarah stood near the back wall, posture relaxed but ready. Doc removed his hat, nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, you must be Sarah. I'm Dr. William Wilson. Ben and I are old friends." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded back. "Doctor, you are welcome." We sat at the table. Doc declined coffee but accepted water. He looked at me with serious eyes. "Thornhill's moving forward with his plan. He's filed paperwork with the territorial marshal. Says there's a runaway Apache living on your property. Says you're harboring her illegally." My jaw tightened. "On what grounds?" on the grounds that all Apache are required to be on designated reservations unless they have written permission from the Indian agent, which coincidentally is Thornhill himself. Sarah's hand clenched into a fist on the table. So he make rule and he enforce rule. No way to win. Doc nodded grimly. That's about the size of it. He looked at me. There's more. He's claiming you assaulted him in town 2 weeks ago. That's a damn lie. I wasn't even in town 2 weeks ago. I know that. You know that. But Thornhill has witnesses who'll swear otherwise. Paid witnesses, I said. Most likely. Doc pulled a folded paper from his jacket. There's a warrant out for your arrest, Ben, for assault on a federal officer, and for harboring a fugitive. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's face had gone pale, but her voice stayed steady. What happens if they arrest? Doc looked uncomfortable. Ben would face trial. Could be looking at 5 to 10 years in territorial prison. Sarah would be sent to the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona, or possibly to the one in Oklahoma. I'd heard about San Carlos. Everyone had. It was a death trap. Disease, starvation, corrupt agents who sold the rations meant for the Indians and pocketed the money. Going there was a slow death sentence. Over my dead body, I said. It might come to that. Doc's voice was quiet. Thornhill's not just doing this to enforce the law, Ben. He wants something. What your land? This valley has water. Good water year-round. The railroad's coming through in the next 2 years. They'll need water rights for their steam engines. Thornhill's been buying up land along the proposed route. Your property sits right in the middle. So he's using the law to force me out. Exactly. Doc spread his hands. If you're in prison and Sarah's on a reservation, your land goes to public auction. Thornhill will buy it for pennies on the dollar. Probably already has the paperwork drawn up. Sarah stood abruptly, paced to the window, looked out at the land we'd been working together. Her land now as much as mine. There must be way to fight, she said. There is. Doc pulled out another paper. You could marry her. Make it legal. A citizen's wife can't be forced onto a reservation without cause, and it would make the harassment charge harder to prove if you're protecting your own wife. Sarah turned from the window, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Marriage not about papers, she said. About choosing each other. We already choose. I know, I said. But sometimes the world needs papers to recognize what's real. Doc stood, settled his hat back on his head. Think about it, but think fast. Thornhill's bringing marshals in 3 days. After that, options get real limited real quick. He left us sitting there in the gathering dusk. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. You want marry me because of law, not because you want. The question hit like a fist. I stood cross to where she stood by the window. Chose my words carefully because they mattered more than anything I'd ever said. I want to marry you because I can't imagine you gone, because the last few weeks have been the best I've had in 17 years, because when I wake up and smell coffee already made, when I hear you singing in Apache while you work, when I watch you move through the world with all that strength and grace, I think maybe I didn't use up all my chances after all. I stopped, met her eyes. The law just gives me the excuse I need to stop being a coward. Her expression softened. Coward. I've been afraid, Sarah. Afraid that I don't deserve happiness. Afraid that God took my family because I did too many bad things in the war. Afraid that if I let myself care about someone again, they'll be taken too. I swallowed hard. But being afraid is no way to live. You taught me that. Coming all this way. Choosing me when you had no reason to. Facing down your uncle. That takes courage. I'm not sure I have. Sarah stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes. Close enough to smell sage in her hair. You think I'm not afraid? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I am terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified that I make you target by coming here. Terrified that one day you wake up and realize you make mistake. But fear is not reason to not do something. Fear is reason to make sure we do it right. She reached out, touched my face gently. First time she'd touched me beyond practical necessity. Her fingers traced the line of my jaw rough with several days' stubble. "You want marry me? Then ask. Not because of law, not because you scared, because you want me." The words came easier than I expected, like they'd been waiting years to be spoken. "Sarah Moon, that rises. I'm 52 years old. Got nothing much to offer except a cabin that needs fixing, some land that people want to steal, and more history than any man ought to carry. But I got something I haven't had in 17 years. I paused. Hope. You gave me that. And I'd be honored, more than honored, if you'd let me spend whatever time I've got left making sure you never regret choosing me." Sarah smiled. Actually smiled slow and genuine. "That is, yes. That's a yes." She kissed me then, soft and brief, but carrying the weight of 10 years and 4 winters of searching. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Then I say yes, too. I marry you. I choose you, like I always say I will." But even in that moment of connection, I could see the shadow cross her face, see the way her gaze shifted toward the window, toward the mountains where Thornhill and his marshals would be coming from. "If we marry," she said quietly, "Thornhill, not stop. He will use other way." "I know. Then we must be ready. Both of us." She straightened warrior again. "You teach me white man ways. I teach you Apache ways. We prepare together." And so we did. That evening, while preparing defenses, Sarah found something that made her freeze. An old Army dispatch box I'd kept hidden under the floorboards. Inside were my service records letters, a faded photograph of my unit. She held up one particular document. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the date, the location. "This village," she said, voice carefully controlled. "This attack. When was this?" I looked at the paper, felt my stomach drop. 64. Before I met you. This is Apache village, near where my mother's people lived." Her eyes met mine. "You were there." "I was a scout. I stopped. Because what could I say? I'd been part of that machine, even if I hadn't pulled a trigger that day." Sarah set down the document, turned away. I saw her shoulders rise and fall with deep breaths. When she turned back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You cannot change what you were, only what you are now." She touched my chest. This man who saves Apache girl, this man I choose. That soldier, he is ghost. Let him stay dead." The forgiveness in her words broke something inside me that had been holding together for decades. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah taught me to read the land the way her people did, how to spot a man-sized disturbance in brush from 100 yards, how to move without leaving tracks in soft earth, how to use the sun and shadows to disappear in plain sight. She was a patient teacher, correcting my mistakes without criticism. I taught her to shoot a pistol properly. She was already decent with a rifle, could hit a target at 200 yards without much trouble. But close quarters fighting was different, required different skills. We practiced drawing, aiming, firing until her hands moved with the same fluid confidence as mine. We fortified the cabin, moved furniture to create better firing positions at the windows, stocked extra ammunition in strategic locations, filled barrels with water in case of fire. It felt like preparing for a siege, which I supposed we were. On the evening of the second day we took a break. Sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The air had turned cool, carrying the promise of autumn. "Tomorrow we go to town," I said. "Find the preacher. Make it legal." Sarah nodded. "Then we come back and wait. Might not have to wait long." "I know." She leaned against my shoulder, small gesture, but it felt monumental. "Ben." "Yeah. You ever regret finding me in snow? Bringing me here?" I thought about it, really considered the question, thought about how much easier life would be if I'd never pulled that half-dead girl out of the snow 10 years ago. No complications, no threats, no need to prepare for violence. Not once I said, "Best thing I ever did, even if we die." Even then. I put my arm around her shoulders. "Some things are worth dying for. Turns out you're one of them." She didn't respond with words, just settled deeper against me and watched the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. We rode into Alamogordo at first light. I'd borrowed a wagon again, wanted Sarah to be comfortable for the trip. She wore a dress Maria had given her weeks back, simple calico that made her look more like a settler's wife than an Apache warrior. Her hair was braided and pinned up. She looked beautiful and nervous and determined all at once. The town was just waking up when we arrived. Shopkeepers sweeping porches, a few early risers heading to the cantina for breakfast. Eyes followed us as we passed. Word had spread. Everyone knew the hermit Hawthorne had taken in an Indian woman. Everyone had opinions. We tied up in front of the small church at the end of the main street. Father Michael was already up, tending the small garden behind the building. He looked up as we approached, brushed dirt from his hands. "Benjamin," he said. His voice carried the lilt of his native Ireland, softened, but not erased by 40 years in America. "And this must be Sarah." "Father," I said, "we're here to be married, if you're willing." He studied us both for a long moment. Father Michael was old, maybe 70, but his blue eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "Does she want this? Or are you forcing it?" Sarah stepped forward. "I want this, Father. I choose him. Nobody force me." The old priest nodded slowly. "Then come inside. We'll talk first. Make sure you both understand what you're doing." We spent an hour in the church. Father Michael asked questions, hard ones, about our intentions and our faith, and whether we understood the challenges we'd face. Sarah answered in her careful English, never wavering. I backed her up when needed, but mostly let her speak for herself. Finally, Father Michael stood. "Very well. I'll marry you. But I'll need witnesses. At least 2. Maria appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "I'll stand witness." Her voice carried quiet strength. "As will I." We all turned. Doc Wilson stepped through the door, medical bag in hand. "Figured you might need someone who could speak to the legality of this union, just in case anyone asks questions later." The ceremony was simple. No music, no flowers, just 5 people standing in a small church while Father Michael read from his prayer book. Sarah and I held hands, both of us aware of the significance beyond the words. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a declaration, a line drawn in the dust that said, we stood together regardless of what came next. When it came time for vows, I spoke first. "I, Benjamin Hawthorne, take you Sarah Moon, that rises to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Sarah's turn came. She took a breath, spoke clearly. "I, Sarah Moon that rises, take you Benjamin Hawthorne to be my lawfully wedded husband." She paused, then added in Apache words I'd taught her to say, "Daya hoe, tu nea e wii, tu jini yishtano." I choose you. I protect you. I stand with you. My pronunciation had been terrible when I'd practiced. Hers was perfect. Father Michael smiled. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico and the Catholic Church, I pronounce you husband and wife." He looked at me. "You may kiss your bride, Benjamin." I did, gentle and respectful, aware of our audience, but not caring. This moment was ours. Maria hugged Sarah afterward, whispered something in Spanish that made Sarah nod seriously. Doc shook my hand with quiet congratulations. Father Michael produced the marriage certificate, had us all sign it. Made copies that he promised to file with the territorial records. "You're legal now," he said. "Let no man put asunder what God has joined." If only it were that simple. We left the church and walked toward the wagon. Maria accompanied us, chattering about plans for a proper celebration once things settled down. Doc promised to stop by the ranch later in the week to check on us. We were halfway to the wagon when the street suddenly went quiet. Colonel Marcus Thornhill stood blocking our path. He wasn't alone. 4 deputy marshals flanked him, all wearing badges and carrying rifles. Behind them, 3 more men on horseback, faces hard and hands resting on pistol grips. "Well now," Thornhill said, his voice carried across the silent street. "Isn't this cozy? A regular family gathering?" "Marcus," I said evenly. "We're just leaving. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Benjamin. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. I have here a warrant for the arrest of one Sarah Moon that rises, also known as Dakea, for the crime of leaving her designated reservation without authorization. Sarah's hand found mine. Squeezed once. That warrant's no good, I said. Sarah's my wife now. Married legal and proper not 10 minutes ago. A citizen's wife can't be forced back to reservation. Thornhill's jaw tightened. That ceremony means nothing. She's still Apache. Still falls under territorial jurisdiction regarding Indian relocation. Doc Wilson stepped forward. Actually, Colonel, the law is quite clear on this matter. Marriage to a citizen grants certain protections. You can't simply arrest her without cause. The hell I can't. Thornhill gestured to his deputies. Take her. The deputies moved forward. I stepped in front of Sarah, hand dropping to the pistol at my hip. The deputies stopped uncertain. You really want to do this, Marcus? I asked quietly. Right here in the street. In front of witnesses. What I want, Thornhill said, voice rising, is for you to stop interfering with federal law. That squaw is coming with me whether you like it or not. Sarah stepped around me before I could stop her, faced Thornhill directly. Her voice was calm but carried to every corner of the street. I am not squaw. I am Sarah Hawthorne, wife of Benjamin Hawthorne, citizen of territory of New Mexico. She pulled the marriage certificate from her pocket, held it up. I have paper, legal paper. You have nothing but hate. Thornhill's face flushed red. You can't just become civilized by putting on a dress and signing a paper. You're still what you are. A goddamn savage who needs to be put back where she belongs. The mask had slipped. His true feelings, always barely concealed, now laid bare for everyone to see. Maria gasped. Father Michael's face hardened. Even some of the deputies looked uncomfortable. Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now everyone see. You not enforce law. You enforce hate. Thornhill lunged forward, hand raised as if to strike her. I moved on instinct, caught his wrist twisted. He yelped, tried to pull free. I held firm. Don't, I said. My voice had dropped to the deadly calm I'd learned in the war. The tone that said violence was a heartbeat away. Don't touch my wife. We stood frozen like that for 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then Doc Wilson's voice cut through the tension. Colonel Thornhill, I believe you're out of line. These good people have broken no law. They have a legal marriage, valid witnesses. Unless you want to explain to the territorial governor why you attempted to assault a citizen's wife in broad daylight, I suggest you stand down. Thornhill jerked his hand free, stepped back. His eyes promised violence even if his body retreated. This isn't over, he said. Not by a long shot. You think you're clever, Hawthorne. You think marrying her solves your problems. But I'll find another way. He looked directly at Sarah. And when I do, you'll wish you'd come quietly. He turned on his heel, stalked toward his horse. The deputies followed clearly, relieved to avoid confrontation. Within moments they were mounted and riding out of town. The street stayed silent for another beat. Then Maria let out a breath she'd been holding. Madre de Dios, she whispered. That man is loco. No, Doc said grimly. He's calculating. And dangerous. He looked at me. You two need to get back to the ranch. Now. And be ready for whatever comes next. We didn't argue. Climbed into the wagon and left town as fast as the horses could pull us without running. Sarah sat beside me, straight-backed and silent. I could feel tension radiating from her like heat from a stove. I'm sorry, she said finally. I bring this to you. You brought yourself, I said. Everything else is just men too small to handle it. She looked at me then, really looked. What we do now? We go home. We prepare. And when Thornhill comes, because he will come, we'll be ready. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than it had that morning. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made us both tense. But we made it without incident, pulled into the yard as the sun reached its peak. Gray Wolf and 3 Apache warriors were waiting on our porch. Sarah drew in a sharp breath. My hand went to my pistol but didn't draw. These weren't enemies. Not exactly. Gray Wolf stood as we approached. His face was unreadable. Uncle Sarah said quietly. Niece. He looked at me. Hawthorne. Gray Wolf, I replied. We're married now, legal and proper. I know. I watch from distance. He gestured toward the mountains. We see what Thornhill do, we hear what he say. Then you know we didn't start this. I know. Gray Wolf's expression shifted slightly. Might have been respect, might have been something else. That is why we come. To warn you. Warn us about what Thornhill not come alone next time. He brings soldiers, real soldiers, not just marshals. He has already sent message to Fort Stanton. They arrive in 2 days. How do you know this? Because we listen, we watch. We know how white men think when they want something. He looked at Sarah. You choose this man, choose this life. We cannot change that, but we can help you prepare for what comes. Sarah climbed down from the wagon, walked to her uncle. They spoke in rapid Apache, too fast for me to follow, even if I'd known enough words. The other warriors dismounted, began moving around the property with practiced efficiency. Gray Wolf finally nodded at whatever Sarah had said. Turned to me. We stay tonight, help you prepare defenses. Tomorrow we leave before soldiers see us, but we will be close. If fighting starts, we will hear. Why help us? I asked. You made it clear you didn't approve. Gray Wolf was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, when Sarah was girl, her father, my brother, he told me something before he died. He said the world is changing. Our children must learn to walk in both worlds, or they will have no world at all. He looked at me. I did not understand then, but I watch you fight for her. Fight with honor, not because she is your property, because she is your equal. That is what my brother meant. So yes, I help. Because you teach me something, love is stronger than hate. And that is lesson our people need to learn too. He extended his hand. I shook it, felt the strength in his grip. Thank you, I said. Thanks, Sarah. She is the one who convinced me you are worth saving. That night was controlled chaos. The Apache warriors, moving with efficiency born of generations of survival, helped us fortify the ranch in ways I'd never considered. They showed us how to create hidden positions in the rocks above the cabin, how to dig shallow trenches that provided cover without being obvious, how to set up false trails that would lead attackers into kill zones. Gray Wolf worked alongside me, sharing knowledge he'd gained from decades of fighting soldiers who wanted his people dead or contained. Thornhill will not expect resistance, he said as we piled rocks to create a barrier. White men think Apache are defeated, think we are all on reservation or dead. This will surprise him, maybe enough to make him back off. Gray Wolf shook his head. Men like him do not back off. They escalate. But surprise gives you advantage. Use it well. Sarah worked with the other warriors, her movements as fluid and practiced as theirs. Watching her, I understood that this was who she truly was. Not the girl I'd saved, not the woman who'd learned to cook and keep house, but a warrior daughter of a warrior people. She'd learned to survive in my world, but she'd never forgotten her own. As darkness fell, we gathered around a small fire. Gray Wolf produced dried meat and flatbread. We ate in silence, each of us preparing mentally for what tomorrow might bring. Before they left, Gray Wolf pulled Sarah aside, spoke to her in low tones I couldn't hear. When they finished, she had tears in her eyes, but her jaw was set with determination. What did he say? I asked after the warriors had disappeared into the darkness. He said to fight well, to honor my father and mother, to show Thornhill that Apache do not surrender easily. She wiped her eyes. And he said if we die, he will make sure our story is remembered. We're not going to die, I said with more confidence than I felt. Maybe not. But if we do, we die together. She took my hand. That is enough. We spent our wedding night taking turns on watch. Not exactly romantic, but fitting somehow. This was the life we'd chosen, the fight we'd committed to together. As dawn broke on our second day as husband and wife, we saw them coming. A column of riders, maybe 20 strong, soldiers in blue uniforms, marshals with badges catching the early light, and at their head, sitting straight in his saddle like he owned the world, Colonel Marcus Thornhill. They stopped at the edge of rifle range. Thornhill rode forward alone, white flag held high. Benjamin Hawthorne, he called. We need to talk." I stepped out onto the porch. Sarah stood beside me, rifle in hand. "Say what you came to say," I called back. "I'm prepared to be reasonable. Give us the woman, and you can walk away from this. No charges, no prison. Just pack up and go. Start over somewhere else." "No," I said. "Simple as that. Be smart, Benjamin. You can't win this. I've got 20 armed men. You've got yourself and a squaw who shouldn't even be here. Do the math." Sarah raised her voice then. "You want me? Come and take me. But know this, I will not go quietly. I will fight. And I will make you pay for every step." Thornhill's face darkened. "So be it. This is your last chance to surrender peacefully. And this is yours to ride away," I said, "while you still can." For a long moment nothing moved. Then Thornhill wheeled his horse around, rode back to his men. I could see him giving orders, gesturing toward the cabin. "Sarah," I said quietly, "get ready." "I am ready." Her voice was calm, steady, like she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. The attack began 5 minutes later with a volley of rifle fire meant to intimidate rather than hit. Bullets smacked into the cabin walls, shattered a window. We returned fire, carefully aimed shots that made them respect our range. The battle had begun, and whatever happened next, we'd face it together. The first volley of rifle fire was meant to intimidate. Bullets thudded into the thick adobe walls of the cabin, sending puffs of dust into the air. One round shattered the front window, spraying glass across the floor. Another splintered the doorframe, but the walls held. Apache and Spanish builders had known what they were doing when they'd constructed this place 40 years ago. Sarah and I had already taken our positions. She crouched by the side window with her rifle calm, as if she were hunting rabbits instead of facing down 20 armed men. I stood at the front, pistol in one hand, rifle propped against the wall within easy reach. The firing stopped. In the ringing silence that followed, I could hear Thornhill shouting orders. Couldn't make out the words, but understood the tone. He was organizing his men, setting up a perimeter. This wasn't going to be a quick assault. He planned to lay siege. "How many bullets we have?" Sarah asked without taking her eyes from the window. "Enough for a while. I'd stocked up weeks ago, sensing trouble coming. We had maybe 200 rounds between us. More than enough for a fight. Not enough for a war. They will try to burn us out." "Probably." I glanced at the water barrels we'd positioned around the cabin. "We can hold them off for a day, maybe 2. After that, it depends on whether help comes. Help from who Gray Wolf said he'd be listening. And Doc Wilson knows we're in trouble. If he can get word to the territorial marshal, the real one, not Thornhill's bought men, they might intervene. Many ifs. I know." I moved to the window beside her, peered out carefully. Thornhill's men had spread out, taking cover behind rocks and scrub brush. Professional positions. These weren't just hired guns. Some of them were real soldiers. That makes this harder. "We do hard things," before Sarah said. "We do them again." Another volley of shots rang out. This time they were aiming, trying to find weak spots in our defenses. A bullet punched through the window frame inches from my head. I ducked back, heart hammering. "They're testing us," I said, "seeing how we respond. Then we show them." Sarah sighted down her rifle, squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed in the small space. Outside, someone yelped. "Return fire," she said calmly. "But choose targets. Make every bullet count." I did as she suggested. Picked out a man trying to move closer under cover of smoke. Led him slightly, accounting for distance and wind. Fired. He went down clutching his leg. Not dead, but out of the fight. We traded shots with Thornhill's men for the next hour. Neither side pressed hard. It was a standoff, both of us waiting to see who'd blink first. Then the pattern changed. I saw movement on the ridge above the cabin. 3 men trying to work their way around to flank us. They thought we were focused on the frontal assault and wouldn't notice. "Sarah," I said. "Ridge, 3 o'clock." She swung her rifle up, tracked the movement, fired 3 times in quick succession. 2 men dropped. The third scrambled back out of sight. "They will try again," she said, reloading smoothly. "Different position next time." She was right. Over the next 2 hours, Thornhill tried 6 different approaches. flanking maneuvers from both sides. A frontal rush that we turned back with concentrated fire. An attempt to use smoke as cover that the wind dispersed before they could advance. Each time we held them off. But each time they learned a little more about our defenses. And we were burning through ammunition faster than I'd like. As the sun climbed toward midday, the attack stopped. Complete silence fell over the valley. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "What they doing?" Sarah asked. I didn't answer right away. Studied the landscape looking for signs. Then I saw it. Thin wisps of smoke rising from multiple points around the property. "Fire," I said. "They're setting fires upwind, trying to smoke us out or force us to fight the flames instead of them." Sarah moved to the back window, looked out. Her face went tight. "The grass is dry. It will burn fast." "We have water," I said, "but not enough to save everything." "Then we choose." She looked at me. "We save the cabin, or we save the horses." The horses were our escape route if things went completely wrong. But the cabin was our fortress. Losing it meant fighting in the open where Thornhill's numbers would overwhelm us. "The cabin," I decided. "We make our stand here." We worked fast, hauling water from the barrels, soaking the walls and roof on the side where the fire was approaching. Sarah climbed up on the roof with a bucket and wet blanket ready to beat out any embers that landed. I stayed below rifle ready in case Thornhill used the fire as cover for another assault. The smoke reached us first, thick and acrid, making my eyes water and lungs burn. Then the flames eating through dried grass with terrifying speed. The wall of orange and black swept toward us like judgment itself. Sarah poured water over the approaching edge. Steam hissed where flames met wet adobe. The fire tried to climb the walls but couldn't find purchase. It split around the cabin, continued past us toward the creek where lack of fuel would stop it. But in focusing on the fire, we'd taken our eyes off Thornhill's men. The crash of breaking wood came from the back door. I spun, brought my rifle up. 2 men burst through, pistols drawn. I fired, hit the first one in the shoulder. He went down screaming. The second got a shot off that missed by inches. Before I could fire again, Sarah dropped through the ceiling trap door, landed behind the intruder. Her knife flashed once. The man crumpled. "More coming," she said, breathing hard. She was right. Thornhill had used the fire as the distraction he needed. Now his men were rushing the cabin from multiple directions, taking advantage of the smoke and our divided attention. We fell back to the main room, positioned ourselves with clear fields of fire to both doors. The front door slammed open. I shot the first man through, wounded another. Sarah's rifle barked twice, dropping 2 more. But they kept coming. Desperate now, or maybe just following orders they couldn't refuse. We traded fire in close quarters, the room filling with gun smoke that mixed with the smoke from outside until I could barely see. A bullet grazed my arm, burned like hot iron. Didn't have time to check how bad it was. Just kept firing, reloading, firing again. Beside me, Sarah moved with mechanical efficiency. Aim, shoot, work the bolt, aim again. Her face was set in lines of grim determination. Then suddenly, it was over. The last attacker retreated through the broken door. Silence fell again, broken only by our ragged breathing and the crackling of distant flames. "How many?" I asked. Sarah did a quick count of the bodies. 4 dead, maybe 5, 6 wounded. Not enough. They still have more than us. I checked my ammunition. Down to maybe 30 rounds. Sarah less, she admitted. 20 maybe. We looked at each other, both understanding what that meant. We could hold them off one more time, maybe 2. After that, we'd be fighting with empty guns. "Ben," Sarah said quietly, "if this end badly, it won't." I interrupted. "Can't let myself think that way, or I'd already lost. But if it does," she continued, "I want you to know. These weeks with you, they are happiest of my life. Even with all this. Even with fighting and fire and blood. I choose right. I choose you." Before I could respond, before I could tell her that she'd given me something, I'd stopped believing in the sound of horses, made us both tense. But these horses weren't coming from Thornhill's position. They were coming from the north, from the mountains. And there were a lot of them. Gray Wolf arrived like thunder made flesh. 20 Apache warriors, maybe more, swept down from the high country on painted ponies. They didn't charge Thornhill's position directly. Instead, they circled, firing from horseback with rifles and bows, making themselves impossible targets while raining death on the men who'd been besieging us. Thornhill's forces, already depleted and demoralized from failing to take the cabin, broke. Some tried to return fire, but the Apache were everywhere and nowhere, striking and vanishing like smoke. Others simply ran, abandoning weapons and positions in their panic. I saw Thornhill himself, face twisted with rage and fear, firing his pistol wildly. Then Grey Wolf rode past him close enough to touch, and something in the colonel's expression changed. He wheeled his horse and spurred it hard, galloping toward the road that led back to town. The battle lasted maybe 10 minutes after Grey Wolf's arrival. When it ended, Thornhill's men were in full retreat, leaving behind their dead and wounded. The Apache warriors circled once more, then formed up and rode to the cabin. Grey Wolf dismounted, looked over the damage. Smoke still rose from the burned grass. The doors hung broken on their hinges. Blood stained the porch and the ground around it. "You fight well," he said to Sarah. Then to me, "And you." For white man, coming from him, it was high praise. "Why did you come?" I asked. "Thought you were just going to watch." "We watch. We see you will lose." Grey Wolf's face was grave. "I tell Sarah to choose her path, but once chosen, family must stand together. You are family now." Sarah stepped forward, embraced her uncle. They spoke in Apache words too fast and emotional for me to follow. When they separated, both had wet eyes, though neither would acknowledge tears. "Thornhill will come back," I said, "with more men. Real army this time." Maybe Grey Wolf agreed. "But not today. Today he runs. That gives you time." "Time for what?" "To finish this. To prove he breaks the law, not you." I remembered what Doc Wilson had said about Thornhill's land schemes, about the fraud and corruption. If we could expose that, maybe we could end this without more bloodshed. "We need evidence," I said. "Documents, proof that he's been operating illegally." Sarah's eyes brightened. "I know where he keep papers, in his office at Reservation Agency. I clean there before I run. I see many documents, see him hide things." "Too dangerous," I started to say. "I go," she said flatly. "I know the building, know how to get in without being seen. And if Thornhill is running scared, now is best time, before he thinks to protect evidence." She was right, much as I hated to admit it. This might be our only chance. "Then I'm going with you," I said. "No." Sarah touched my wounded arm gently. "You are hurt. You stay, help Grey Wolf protect the ranch." I moved faster alone. The argument built in my throat but died before I could voice it. She was a warrior, had proven it today and 100 times before. Treating her like she needed protecting would insult everything she was. "Be careful," was all I said. "Always." She kissed me quickly. "Wait for me." Then she was moving, gathering supplies, checking her weapons. Within 10 minutes she was mounted and riding east toward Alamogordo. I watched until she disappeared from sight, fighting the urge to call her back. Grey Wolf stood beside me. "You trust her?" "With my life." "Good. Because you may have to." He gestured to his warriors. "We will help you repair defenses. When she returns, you may need to fight again." We spent the afternoon and evening working. The Apache warriors showed us how to create better firing positions, how to use the burned ground to our advantage, how to set up obstacles that would funnel attackers into kill zones. They worked with quiet efficiency, teaching me techniques that had kept their people alive through generations of warfare. As the sun set, one of the younger warriors approached me, spoke in halting English. "Your woman," he said. "She is strong. You are lucky." "I know," I replied. "Luckier than I deserve." He nodded seriously. "When woman chooses man, that is greatest honor. You must be worthy of choice." "I intend to be." He smiled, brief and genuine, then returned to his work. Night fell. Sarah hadn't returned. I tried not to worry, told myself she knew what she was doing, that she'd survived worse than sneaking into an office. But the waiting gnawed at me. Every shadow could be her. Every sound might be her horse. Gray Wolf sat with me by the fire we'd built in the yard away from the damaged cabin. "You love her," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, that is good. Love makes people fight harder, fight smarter." He poked at the fire with a stick. "But love also makes people do foolish things, take stupid risks." "I know. Make sure your love makes you strong, not weak. She needs strong man beside her, not man who breaks because he fears losing her." "I won't break. We shall see." Gray Wolf stood stretched. "I will put warriors on watch rotation. You should rest while you can." "Can't sleep." "Not while she's out there. Then think. Plan for what comes next. Because when she returns with or without papers, Thornhill will not stop. He has lost face, lost men. That kind of man he must destroy what defeats him, or he is destroyed himself." "What do you think will happen?" "I think tomorrow will bring final battle. Either you win completely, or you lose everything." His eyes reflected firelight. "Make sure you win." He walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the stars. Sarah returned 2 hours before dawn. I heard the horse first recognize the gate, ran to meet her as she dismounted. She was covered in dust and sweat but smiling, holding up a leather document case. "I have them," she said. "All the papers Thornhill hide, deeds, contracts, letters, everything." We took the documents inside lit lamps, spread them across the table. Even my untrained eye could see the fraud. Land sales for properties Thornhill didn't own, contracts signed with forged names, letters detailing payments to officials who'd looked the other way. It was comprehensive corruption documented in Thornhill's own hand. "This is enough," I said. "More than enough. We get this to the territorial marshal, to a judge, and Thornhill's finished." "But how we get to them?" Sarah asked the obvious question. "Thornhill will be watching roads. We'll have men looking for us. Then we don't use roads." I looked at Gray Wolf, who'd come in when he heard Sarah's arrival. "Is there another way to Santa Fe mountain trails?" he said slowly. "Hard riding. 3 days instead of 2 on the road. But yes, there is way. Can you guide us?" Gray Wolf considered, then nodded. "But we must leave soon. Thornhill will know his papers are missing. We'll guess where they go." "We'll leave at first light," I said. "Sarah and I together. If Gray Wolf can spare 1 or 2 warriors as guides." "I will guide you myself," Gray Wolf said. "This is too important to trust to others." He looked at Sarah. "You are sure about this? Once you do this, you make powerful enemy forever." "Already have powerful enemy," Sarah replied. "This way I also have justice." The decision made, we tried to rest for the few hours before dawn. I managed maybe an hour of fitful sleep dreams filled with fire and blood and Sarah's face disappearing into smoke. When I woke, she was sitting beside me, hand resting on my shoulder. "Morning comes," she said softly. "Time to finish this." We prepared quickly, filled canteens, packed food, checked weapons. Gray Wolf selected 2 of his best horses for us mountain-bred animals with steady feet and strong hearts. As the eastern sky began to lighten, we mounted up. The other Apache warriors had already left, melting back into the mountains. They'd done their part. Now it was up to us to finish it. We rode hard for 3 days. Gray Wolf led us along trails I never would have found, paths that wound through canyons and over ridges, always climbing higher into the Sangre de Cristo range. The terrain was brutal, but it kept us hidden from anyone trying to track us. On the 2nd day, we saw riders in the valley below, Thornhill's men searching for us on the main road. We stayed high and quiet, watched them pass. "He knows," Sarah said. "Let him know," I replied. "By the time he figures out where we went, we'll already be in Santa Fe." That night we camped in a small valley with a stream running through it. Gray Wolf stood watch while Sarah and I tended the horses and made a cold camp, no fire that might give away our position. "Tomorrow we reach Santa Fe," Gray Wolf said. "After that I leave you. Cannot be seen in city. Too many soldiers." "We understand," I said, "and thank you for everything." He nodded. "You take care of my niece. You keep promise." "I will." "Good. Because if you do not, I will hear of it. And then I will be very disappointed." The words were light, but carried an edge of steel. That night, lying under the stars with Sarah beside me, I thought about how far we'd come. Two people from different worlds, thrown together by chance and choice, now fighting for the right to exist together. It shouldn't have been this hard. Shouldn't have required bloodshed and flight and legal maneuvering. But that was the world we lived in. All we could do was keep fighting to change it one small battle at a time. Sarah stirred beside me. "You are thinking too loud," she murmured. "Can't help it. What you think about how this should be easier, about how people should be able to love who they choose without the world trying to tear them apart." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, if it was easy, maybe we not appreciate so much. Hard things, they make us stronger, make us sure." Is that Apache wisdom? No. That is Sarah wisdom. She rolled toward me, head resting on my shoulder. I learn it from surviving, from choosing to live when dying would be easier, from choosing you when walking away would be safer. "I'm glad you chose me," I said. "Me too." We reached Santa Fe late on the third day. Gray Wolf left us at the outskirts, clasped my arm once in farewell, touched Sarah's face gently. Then he was gone, riding back toward the mountains and the life he knew. Sarah and I continued alone into the city. It was bigger than Alamogordo, full of adobe buildings and narrow streets, Mexican and Anglo cultures mixing in markets and cantinas. We found the office of Federal Marshal James Patterson just before it closed for the day. Patterson was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray mutton chops and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. He listened to our story without interruption, occasionally making notes. When we spread Thornhill's documents on his desk, his expression grew darker with each page he examined. "This is extensive," he said finally, "and damning, if it's authentic." "It's authentic," I said. "Stolen directly from Thornhill's office." "Stolen evidence is still stolen," Patterson said. "But given the nature of these crimes, I think a judge will overlook the method of acquisition." He looked up at us. "You understand what this means? If I pursue this, Thornhill will come after you with everything he has." "He's already doing that," Sarah said. "This way maybe he lose." Patterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll take this to Judge Morrison tomorrow morning. He's honest, which is rare enough these days. If he sees what I see, he'll issue warrants." He paused. "Where will you be staying?" "There's a boarding house near the plaza," I said. "Mrs. Henderson's place. We'll be there. Stay inside. Don't go out unless absolutely necessary. If Thornhill has people in Santa Fe, and he probably does, they'll be looking for you." We took his advice. Spent 2 days in a small room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house waiting for word. It was strange being cooped up after all the fighting and riding. Sarah paced like a caged cat. I tried to read but couldn't concentrate. On the third day, Patterson himself came to the boarding house. His expression was grim. "Judge Morrison has issued arrest warrants for Colonel Marcus Thornhill on multiple charges of fraud, corruption, and abuse of office." He looked at me. "There's also a warrant for assault and attempted murder. Seems several witnesses came forward about the attack on your ranch, including some of Thornhill's own men who decided saving their own skins was more important than loyalty." "Where is Thornhill now?" "That's the problem," Patterson said. "He's disappeared. Left Alamogordo 2 days ago with a half-dozen men. We don't know where he went." "He is coming here," Sarah said with certainty. "Coming for us." "Possibly." Patterson straightened. "That's why I'm offering you protective custody. There's a federal building with secure rooms. You'd be safe there until we locate Thornhill." I looked at Sarah. She shook her head slightly. "Thank you," I said, "but we'll take our chances on our own. We've been running and hiding long enough." Patterson didn't look surprised. "Then at least take these." He handed me 2 deputy marshal badges. They're temporary, but they give you legal authority to defend yourselves if necessary. Just try not to shoot anyone unless they really need shooting. "We'll do our best," I said. He left. We spent the rest of the day preparing, cleaned our weapons, loaded them carefully, made sure we had clear sight lines from the windows of our room, arranged furniture to provide cover. If Thornhill came, and we both believed he would, we'd be ready. He came at midnight. I was dozing in a chair by the window when I heard the creak of floorboards in the hallway. different from the normal sounds of the old building. These were careful steps, deliberate. Sarah was already awake, rifle in hand, positioned behind the bed. Our eyes met. She nodded once. The door exploded inward, the lock splintering under a heavy boot. 3 men rushed through, guns drawn. I fired from my position, hit the first one. Sarah's rifle barked twice, dropping the second and third. But more were coming. Thornhill had brought his remaining men, maybe 8 or 10, and they swarmed through the doorway like ants. We held them in the narrow opening for maybe 30 seconds. Then the sheer press of bodies forced us back. I grabbed Sarah's hand, pulled her toward the window. It was only 1 story up. We could make the drop. But as I reached for the latch, Thornhill himself appeared in the doorway. He held a rifle pointed directly at Sarah. "Enough," he said, voice cold and steady. "Put down your weapons or I shoot her." I hesitated. Sarah squeezed my hand once. "Don't," she said quietly. Thornhill cocked the rifle. "Last chance, Hawthorne." Time seemed to slow. I could see the certainty in Thornhill's eyes, could see the slight tremor in his hands that spoke of rage barely controlled, could see Sarah's calm acceptance of whatever came next. And I realized something. Thornhill had already lost. The warrants were issued, his crimes exposed. Even if he killed us, even if he escaped tonight, his life as he'd known it was over. This was just spite, the last violent spasm of a man who couldn't accept defeat. "I'm not putting down my gun," I said, "but I'm not shooting either. Neither is Sarah. You want to kill us, you'll have to do it in cold blood, in front of all your men. Let them see exactly what kind of man you are." Thornhill's jaw tightened. "You think I won't?" "I think you're already finished, Marcus. The warrants are signed. Judges knows everything, every fraudulent deed, every bribed official, every crime you committed for money and power. Killing us just adds murder to the list." "You ruined me," he said, voice shaking now. "I had everything, position, wealth, respect. Then you had to go and save 1 goddamn Indian girl. That goddamn Indian girl is worth 100 of you," I said quietly. "And I'd save her again. Every time." For a moment I thought he'd shoot anyway, saw his finger tighten on the trigger. But then Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You hate us because we show you what you are not," she said. "We choose each other, choose to fight for each other, choose to stand together even when world says we should not. You never choose anything except power, never stand for anyone except yourself. That is why you lose, not because we fight better, because we fight for something bigger than our own hatred." Thornhill stared at her. Something in his face crumpled. The rifle wavered. And then Marshal Patterson burst through the door with 6 armed deputies. "Drop the weapon," Colonel Patterson ordered. Thornhill's men scattered immediately, hands going up. Only Thornhill himself remained, frozen rifle still pointed at Sarah. "It's over," Marcus Patterson said. More gently now. "No way out. Just put the gun down." For 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Nobody moved. Then Thornhill lowered the rifle, let it clatter to the floor, stood there with shoulders sagging, all the fight gone out of him. Patterson's men moved in, cuffing Thornhill and his remaining followers. The marshal himself approached us. "You two all right?" "We're fine," I said. "How did you know to come?" Mrs. Henderson heard the commotion, sent her son running for help. Patterson looked at the bodies on the floor, the bullet holes in the walls. "Hell of a mess." "We'll pay for damages," I said. He actually smiled at that. "Federal government will cover it. This whole room is now evidence of Thornhill's attempt to silence witnesses." He sobered. "You're going to need to testify. Make this stick legally." "We'll be there," Sarah said. "Good." Patterson gestured to his men. "Get these bodies out of here, and find these two a new place to stay. Somewhere Thornhill's friends can't find them." We spent the next week in federal custody, not as prisoners, but as protected witnesses. The trial moved with unusual speed, probably because Judge Morrison wanted to make an example of Thornhill. We testified to everything: the attacks, the intimidation, the fraud. Sarah's testimony about conditions on the reservations and Thornhill's corruption as Indian agent was particularly damning. Thornhill was convicted on all charges, sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. His land holdings were forfeit, his wealth seized. The men who'd followed him received lesser sentences in exchange for their cooperation. When it was finally over, when all the legal proceedings had concluded and we were free to go, Marshal Patterson walked us to the stage depot. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Go home," I said. "Try to rebuild. Live quietly if the world will let us." "World probably won't," Patterson said, "but I expect you two will manage anyway." He tipped his hat to Sarah. "Ma'am, it's been an honor." "Thank you, Marshal," she replied, "for everything." We took the stage back to Alamogordo, arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The town looked the same but felt different. Word of Thornhill's arrest and trial had spread. People who'd avoided us before now nodded greeting. Some even smiled. Maria met us at the general store, hugged Sarah tightly. "Knew you would win," she said. "Knew it in my heart." Doc Wilson came by that evening, brought whiskey and congratulations. To justice he toasted. And to stubborn people who won't quit. The ranch required weeks of work to repair fully. The burned grass grew back green after the fall rains. We rebuilt the doors, fixed the windows, patched the bullet holes. Gray Wolf visited twice, brought gifts of dried meat and woven blankets. Relations between his people and the town improved slightly. Not perfect, but better than before. We spent the next week in federal custody, not as prisoners, but as protected witnesses. The trial moved with unusual speed, probably because Judge Morrison wanted to make an example of Thornhill. Within 2 weeks, it was over. We testified to everything. 6 months after the trial, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. We stood together on the porch where this had all begun, her hand resting on her belly, my arm around her shoulders. "Girl or boy?" I asked. "Girl," she said with certainty. "She will be strong. We'll know both worlds. We'll be bridge between her people and yours." "Our people," I corrected gently. "Yes," she agreed. "Our people." We named our daughter Emma Rose Hawthorne. Emma for my mother. Rose because that's what Sarah chose, wanting our daughter to have a flower name. She was born in late spring with Sarah's dark hair and my blue eyes crying lustily to announce her presence to the world. Gray Wolf came for the birth, brought gifts from the tribe. A cradle board lovingly crafted, tiny moccasins, a blessing in Apache that translated roughly to "May she walk in beauty." She will know her heritage, I promised him, both sides of it. We'll teach her Apache and English, show her the old ways and the new. "That is good," Gray Wolf said. Held. Emma carefully studied her face. "She looks like her grandmother, my sister." He smiled, rare expression on his weathered face. "That is very good." 2 years after Emma's birth, everything had settled into a new normal. The ranch had grown not just in size, but in spirit. We'd built a second barn, expanded the corral. Our 2 hired hands had become Family Jake, a former cavalry soldier who'd seen enough violence, and Miguel Maria's nephew who'd come seeking honest work. The territory was changing faster than any of us expected. Statehood was just around the corner. The railroad had brought not just commerce, but a mixing of cultures that would have been unthinkable a decade before. I'd seen Apache and white children playing together in town. Saw Sarah greeted by name at the general store. Small changes, but they mattered. Relations between Apache and settlers remained tense, but no longer explosive. Gray Wolf had negotiated better terms for his people, gotten them moved to land closer to their traditional territories. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Maria had married again, a good man who treated her well. Doc Wilson's rheumatism was getting worse, but he still made his rounds. Father Michael continued to preach tolerance, though with mixed results. On a warm evening in early summer, I sat on the porch with Emma on my lap while Sarah prepared dinner. The child babbled happily, mixing English and Apache words in the way of all children learning language. She had no idea that her very existence was a statement, a declaration that different worlds could merge and create something beautiful. What you think about Sarah called from inside. Just how things change, I called back. How impossible everything seemed 3 years ago, and how normal it feels now. She came out, wiped her hands on her apron, sat beside me. "Not normal," she corrected. "Special. We fight for this. Make it happen through blood and courage and love. Never forget that." "I won't," I promised. Emma reached up, touched my face with one small hand. "Papa," she said clearly. One of her first real words. Sarah laughed, delighted. "She talks." "Course she does," I said, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. "She's your daughter, stubborn and smart and destined to change the world," our daughter Sarah corrected. "And yes, she will change many things." We sat together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. 3 people where there had been 2. A family where there had been isolation. Hope where there had been despair. 10 years ago, a frightened girl had made an impossible promise to a lonely man. She'd said she'd come back to marry him when she was grown. He'd smiled sadly, thinking it was just childish gratitude. He'd been wrong. She'd meant every word, had spent 4 winters searching, had risked everything to keep that promise, and in keeping it, she'd saved him just as surely as he'd once saved her. Some promises are forgotten, some are broken. But the best ones, the ones worth keeping, they're the promises that change everything, that turn loneliness into family, fear into courage, survival into living. She'd said she'd come back to marry me. I thought she was joking. She wasn't, and thank God for that. The stars came out one by one as night fell over the ranch. Emma dozed in my arms. Sarah leaned against my shoulder. Somewhere in the mountains, Gray Wolf's people sang their evening songs. In the valley, life continued its endless cycle. We'd fought for this peace, bled for it, nearly died for it. But we'd won. Not just the battles, but the war itself. The war for the right to love who we chose. To build a life together despite everything working against us. To create a future where our daughter could walk freely between 2 worlds. It had been hard, would continue to be hard, but as Sarah had said, hard things make us stronger, make us sure of our choices, and I'd never been more sure of anything than I was of this woman beside me, this warrior, this wife, this mother, this impossible, stubborn, beautiful person who'd refused to let the world tell her who she could love. She'd chosen me when I was nobody special, just a broken man living alone with his ghosts. She'd seen something in me worth saving, worth fighting for, worth traveling 4 winters to find, and I'd spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice. Emma stirred in my arms, made a small sound. Sarah reached over, stroked our daughter's hair gently. "Time for bed," she said softly. We stood, went inside together, put Emma down in her crib. She fussed briefly, then settled thumb, finding its way to her mouth. Sarah and I stood watching her sleep. Our miracle. Our proof that love could overcome anything if you fought hard enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, always did. But tonight, we had peace. We had each other. We had this life we'd built from nothing but determination and faith. Some people would say we were lucky. I preferred to think we'd earned it. Every scar, every bullet, every moment of terror and triumph, all of it had led here, to this small cabin, this family, this future. Sarah took my hand, squeezed once. I squeezed back. No words were necessary. We'd said everything that mattered 3 years ago when she'd stood in my yard and declared her intention, when I'd finally stopped being afraid and accepted what she was offering. The promise had been kept. The circle was complete. And our story, the one that had started with a girl bleeding in the snow and a man who couldn't walk away, continued into whatever tomorrow would bring. Together. Always together.